Hey Happy Crew, HappiDaze here. In today's video, we're looking at the PvP aspects of the new Shaka unit that just came out, featuring Edison and Pythagoras with him. So this is the latest of the Vegapunk units to come out. Take a look at what his kit can do. We'll have some actually real gameplay videos against teams that aren't kind of in the single matches, so you can actually see what it looks like in real content. And then we'll see, does he actually fit well in an int cerebral team with Vegapunk units? Is he still valuable in the int meta team? We'll take a look at all that. But before we actually get into the gameplay videos, let's take a quick look at what his kit can do, just as a quick reminder. So taking a look at his Rumble abilities, he is very focused on having the other Vegapunk units on there, and his base leader ability will give int-type cerebral class teammates attack up 6, defense up 6. Good buffs, can't complain, and then further, if any of the Vegapunk units are on your crew, then he basically gives them special CT speed up level 5. Fantastic, especially with another unit like the Cell Vegapunk, who can give you an extra 2 to that as well. You can really make sure you get your specials off quick. So when you're ever trying to find teams that are really good and then can beat some of the higher end teams, they have to be able to get their specials off quick. One, because you have units like Nami and Karina who can reverse them, and then that kind of puts you in a really bad spot. And two, you have specials that hit through defense that just absolutely will crush you, right? With the Roger Whitebeard attack through defense there, or whether you have the S-Hawk. So yeah, just a lot of crazy units out there that can do damage to defense, so you want to make sure you're getting your specials off quick. And as long as you have Vegapunk units on your crew, he's going to give you plus 5 CT speed, which is nothing to joke at for those Vegapunk units. So, mildly okay. Captain base ability, let's take a look at what his special does at level 10. It is a 28 turn CD, so pretty low, not actually that bad. Obviously, with the 5 he gives himself, then you get down to 23, and it's actually not too shabby. But he will target int-type cerebral class teammates for attack up 8, speed up level 8. So you get attack and speed up both level 8. Not terrible, not game-breaking. It's just kind of nice to have. But the value that I think comes from his special is in the next part of his special here, which basically says that if you have any of the Vegapunk units on your crew, then he will target 3 teammates, not including himself, with a high special CT for a 30% reduction, which is kind of crazy. So originally I thought, oh, you have to build teams that are specifically focused around the Vegapunk units, but luckily, as long as you have just one of the Vegapunk units, you'll be able to get this special CT reduction. Now, granted, when you'll see when doing some videos, it's not the end-all be-all, but getting your specials off quick is really important in the game, especially in PvP. So definitely like the fact that you can get a 30% CT reduction, and it's on a low cooldown at 23, and you like that. And then if you do have any of the Vegapunk units on his crew, gives a 100% chance of haste for those units. So again, pretty good, like not too terrible. So and he also gets a 30% resistance to Psi. He doesn't really have any good grand party stats, so we're not going to kind of go over that. But yeah, you really want to be able to build teams for this character that are either focused on int cerebral units, Vegapunk units, or if you're looking for a more defensive style, you can always go the route of trying to find units that are int cerebral that do healing, or that will kind of help you delay specials and keep going. So this is where units like Nami and Karina, who are cerebral units, even though they're not int, are fantastic. But that being said, let's start getting into some of these videos. We'll talk about gameplay, we'll talk about what some strategies are, and we'll show you how this unit can do in PvP and give some final thoughts once we're all done. Alright, so getting into the first match of this series of 3 different teams, we're going to go with the team that you see below, so I'll kind of explain it as we go through the different matches. So the important thing to remember is that they really want you to use Vegapunk units. So these first series of videos are going to be teams that are using this whole Vegapunk family to kind of get the job done. So the benefits of using the Vegapunk family of units is, one, because you get the special CT to them as part of the captain ability of the Shaka. You also get them hasted if his special goes off, so that's kind of nice as well. And if you have at least one of the Vegapunk units on your crew, then you get special increase 30% for 3 units, not including Shaka himself. So it's super helpful to get your specials going off really quick. So you can see in this video we have like a 9 cooldown on Vegapunk, even up to 14 on Atlas, and it just does so much. But this team really isn't geared towards being a great attacking team, just because, as you can see here, the main damage dealers on this team are really the Atlas unit, who admittedly can hit like a tank if you have at least 5 cerebral units on your team. But other than that, you have York, who does the counter mechanic, but she's nowhere near as good as Zoro that you see on the Free Spirit team, so she's just meh for damage. Like, it's not really that great. So you can see here, we're kind of just stalling out, and I think that the Vegapunk team is going to be best for defensive base team. So I did have this team out there as my defensive team. I ended up getting 14 or 15 defensive wins using this team, and it was like a 45% win rate. So that's actually really good for defensive teams. So I think that the team that you see here specifically is going to be really good for defensive teams, not so much offensive teams. Now, you do have the Vegapunk unit in the middle there, the Stella unit, who can do the 40% damage, does some special reverse, and I believe it's also the Lilith who does a little bit of special reverse too, but only to one enemy, and she does like a really bad damage over time buff. So you really need to have units on your bench that can help support, because these units, while you have a lot of defensive capability in terms of what York can do and her cat's ability, as well as what she provides in her special, like it's a very squishy team. So you can see here, even though I pretty much made it to the end and I had a lot of bad luck having to face that Odin and getting bound 2 or 3 times during this match, but you can see that's the downside, is that they just don't have that damage output that you really need to do a lot of damage. They have the defensive capability, and it can last a long time. Like if you saw when we looked at some of the defensive stats of some of these units while they're in mid-battle, I think at some points you get up to 25 plus defense, which is just kind of crazy with what you can do. So I do like to throw the S-Hawk, the Smoker, and King on the back bench. Yeah, they're not cerebral units, so they don't get a lot of the buffs, but really they just come in and hopefully just do some damage dealers and save your battle if things got going south and you have to rely. So we did lose this first match. It's okay. This video is meant to show people, when these teams are good versus when they're bad. So if you're facing teams that make you go, for example, long matches where they just keep doing consistent damage, like particularly like the Dex team, that can cause some issues. But if you're not facing any of those teams, or probably the int slasher team, I wouldn't face the int team, or the slash chat meta teams, I both wouldn't face with this team, because like I said, they just, while they have a lot of CT, they're just not good enough to really go ahead and get what you need to get that damage up quick enough to do some wins. You'll see in some of the other 2 videos that we're doing, our other 2 team videos, that we actually modify some of the existing teams and really make them powerful, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So again, this team, we're facing obviously the I think it's mostly Dex. You do have the Blackbeard who you have to watch out for. He's obviously a pain to deal with, but you can see we're just kind of going. The goal of this team is really get your defense up, hit with Atlas and York, and really just keep trying to get your specials to go off as quick as you can. And that's accomplished through that Shaka unit and the ability for him to give you 30% CT cooldown to units that have high special CT. So just helps get those specials off quicker. I think once you get York to a much higher level, it'll be a little bit better. I don't think she'll be as good as that throw unit, like I said, but if she does a little bit more damage, she might be a little bit better for other teams. But if you don't have this York unit, the problem is that all these Vegapunk units are legends, and they're 55 cost. So if you had one more 55 cost unit, you basically couldn't take any of the awesome units that you saw on the back bench that we had out there. And that's a problem. So if you don't have York, it makes it super difficult to justify using Shaka, because you're just not going to be able to build a team that's great with the cost restrictions that are there. So still going to this fight, so you can see we're kind of chugging along. We did have some special reverse from the cross skill, which was just a pain to deal with. This team that facing has a lot of defense, but you can see that's why I mentioned bringing King onto that back bench. Even if he isn't cerebral or int unit, like his special can just light up and save the day for you. So pretty crazy team with the cross guild and S-Hawk there, but we're able to eke out the win, which was good. So going into match number 3 of the day, I'm not going to place that first team. That's just too easy of a team. That'd be an easy victory. But let's try this team here, mostly because this is a cerebral team that's meant to have a lot of HP and tankiness to it, stall out a lot of it. So we're going to see if we can go ahead and beat this team. So again, there's not really too many crazy units on here. You obviously have the Chopper who can do the healing. You have the Uta who can do some damage too, and she gets some CT on their side as well. So teams like this that aren't like meta teams, like this team could do pretty good against. And this is why I mentioned that you should use this team as a defensive team as opposed to relying on this to be an offensive juggernaut and take on some of those crazy high teams. So, and you can see there, that's just the horribleness of Lilith. She's just such a terrible unit that if she wasn't giving some CT speed for us, like, she wouldn't even be here. Like, there'd be no reason for her to be here. But she is, so that's why she's giving us that speed. So yeah, we get this 9 CT speed, 5 from Shaka, 2 from Vegapunk, and then the other 2 from Lilith to help us go. You can see here, high defense, and we're chugging along. You'll see here, this is where Atlas just can melt people, and she's only 110 for me. If she was like fully level limp broke, like 150, she'd be insane in terms of just the amount of damage she could do. So luckily she's kind of the kingpin of this team, helping us get damage done, and then we just slowly plug away with the York damage for anyone who doesn't do that. So we get the special delay here from the Vegapunk, of course, 40% damage reduction. They were mostly dead, so it really didn't do too much for us in terms of helping us win the victory. But that kind of is what it is. So this should be an easy match from this point forward. Nothing really too crazy. We're going to easily get the dub there. And that's going to wrap up the first set of matches. Again, these are using the Vegapunk team units. This is how they want you to build the content for. But as you can see, they're much more better on defense focused, and they're not really that great on offense focused teams. So with that said, that's going to wrap up this set of fights. Let's go check out the next set of fights, which are going to be kind of the meta int team with some of the new Vegapunk units inside of it. For the second series of fight that we're doing here, we are switching to the meta int team, and we're kind of changing up a little bit to make it our team. So what we're doing here is we're replacing the typical Yamato and the S-Hawk unit that you see on the meta int team with Shaka and York. And the reason that we're really doing that is because we want to be able to get these specials off really quick, right? That's whenever you're facing kind of really tight teams that are crazy, like the Slasher team or like the other int meta team that you see, then like you have to get your special off quick, otherwise you're gonna get absolutely rocked before you can get your stuff off, and you'll lose and have no chance of winning. So the idea here, building this team like this, is to be to get Shaka to give the cooldown to 3 of our members of our crew outside of himself, and that'll just help us get our specials off quicker. Now, one thing to note about this team is that the only real damage dealers on this team are really the Luffy and the York, right? So that's kind of the downside of this team. The Blackbeard and the Nami and Karina are really just being used to help get that special rewind, to let your big damage dealers do what they do, right? Now, as I said, York is not really that great in terms of her counter ability. She's not Zoro, so she does a limited fixed amount of damage. So getting that Luffy to go off is the key to making this team work. So if you don't have Yamato or S-Hawk, this is a great replacement. Now, granted, you need both of those units of York and Shaka, and York is just so valuable in these teams because she's a 20 cost unit as opposed to 55 cost, so you can keep your backbench as it is, because you do need 5 powerhouse characters on this team to be able to get the additional buffs from the Blackbeard that give the CT down and just debuff the enemy a little bit, right? So we have to build our team with 5 powerhouse, so that's why the backbench is not focused on Cerebral or anything like that. So you can see we took a shot here from Luffy, but because our defense was so high, we were able to hold on. We had 2 units forced out, not a big deal. Luffy's going to go do a nice shot himself, force out the Yamato unit himself there, and at this point, it's GG's. Like, this is why this team is really good. Now, obviously, they're not better than the meta int team, but if you didn't have Yamato or S-Hawk, like, this wouldn't be a terrible replacement for that team. So, and I imagine that even on teams against, like, the Slashers, like, you'd be able to do pretty good. Now, so you have to make sure you get your specials off first. But assuming you can do that, you know, this team should be pretty good for even taking on some of those fights as well. We're going to take the shot here from Yamato, which is fine. It just is what it is. And then when we kill her, we'll take another shot. But because we have plenty of units on our back bench, even if she kills 2 units when we kill her, it's not a big deal at all. So this team will really thrive, I think, if you're able to get your specials off pretty quickly. And that Shaka just helps you do that much quicker than you could before. And also help too, we've had some videos and further that you'll see in the fights where actually having Shaka speed up Nami and Karina or Blackbeard like saves the run, just because being able to reverse specials, especially with that Nami and Karina unit, just makes it so much easier. So you can see, got the first win of the day. Was a little close, but not too frightening there, but enough for us to feel pretty confident about this team. So let's go ahead and take on this team next. Now, obviously, they have some units on here that scare me in the back bench. They have the Raizu and Shinobu, always a pain to deal with. They have the Blackbeard and Whitebeard who can do the damage through defense there. They have Shanks who does a little bit of shield for them. And really, I'm not really too worried about the Shiki unit there. He really just debuffs slashers, but I don't think we have any slashers actually on our team, except for maybe the Pell on the back bench, so that really shouldn't matter too much for us. So, once again, we should be able to get through this pretty quickly. You can see that Shaka's already ready to go, and the match just started, which is fantastic. And basically, once the Nami and Karina go, and once the Blackbeard go, and then you have Shaka go, like, right after that, like, you'll see, like, it just makes it much less riskier because you're able to take your specials up quicker and reverse their specials and give that time for that Luffy to do his damage or York to do her damage. So yeah, we're just chugging along here. As you can see, we get the counter on York. Again, just pumping up that defense of the whole team just to make us good. And Luffy's just like, boom, I'm just going to knock out 5 people. Now, ideally, you want to have the Shock unit be able to buff Luffy. But if you boost the Blackbeard and the Nami and Karina, like that's just as good. They'll buy enough time for Luffy to get his special go if he's close. So that's the good news about this team. So you can see we got through this fight like no problem. Barely took any damage except for York, who had the provoke on her, and pretty easily destroyed the Slasher team. So let's go ahead and take on the third match using this team, and that will wrap up this series of battles, and we'll see how it looks. So going into this third match, let's go ahead and the side teams are just a little bit weird. Yeah, we get some debuffs for the side teams, but I do want to take a more crazy Slasher team like what you see here. I want to really see if we had a team where you're facing units like Esok, like how they do, right? So obviously you have the Kinemon who gives some increase, I believe, to CT on their side. You have the Odin who gives increase to CT. So I want to see in this fight, like, given a team that has a high CT and is highly deadly, are we able to get our specials off before them, right? Because that's kind of the key of whether a team is really viable long-term for different content. So the good news is we're going to get the Shaka to go first. He's going to haste York, get the counter up. But really what we want to see is that Blackbeard to go, because he'll do the special rewind and give us a chance to hopefully fight back before Esok and, of course, Roger and Whitebeard go there. So took a little bit shot here, but because we had 25 defense, like, it really wasn't too crazy. Luffy does his shot there, doing some force out as well. You love to see that. Unfortunately, Nami ended up special reversing 1 unit, which does pretty much nothing for us. But the benefit here is because they're forced out for, I think it's 10 seconds, something like that, we have plenty of time to be able to let Shaka build up his gauge. It should go just about when he gets his next turn going, and that will just give us a CT to 3 of our high CT units. So you see we got Yorks, Blackbeards, Nami, and Karina special ready to go. That's good. That means by the time those units that got forced out come back in, we'll be able to just special rewind them and then just get that Luffy charge ready to go again. So that's kind of the goal, like I said, of this team. Working pretty well so far. Do some more special rewind there. And yeah, from here on in, it's like, it's easy peasy victory. So that's going to wrap up these series of fights with kind of a modified meta int team. So this team actually would be pretty good for offensive based things if you don't have Yamato and Esok. Obviously, if you have them, then I would use them in that place. But if you want to use this new Shaka unit, like, he actually works pretty well with York in that scenario. So in the final series of battles, we're going to do a little more kind of hodgepodge team. Assuming you don't have some of these kind of crazier units like the Blackbeard, and build like a more cerebral focused team and see if we can take on some content and beat some other enemies and do a kind of final wrap up of what we think of this unit. So let's get right to those fights right now. Going into the final set of battles here, we kind of built a team that we'll talk about when we get into the match, but basically the thought process of this team was I didn't want to have Blackbeard on there just because a lot of people might not have Blackbeard. So I was like, you know what, let me use what I have, still have to work within the cost constraints, and at least we don't have to build units that are powerhouse to kind of satisfy Blackbeard's conditional. So it makes it a little bit better. So these are the fights that we're going to do. The idea here is that we lacked a lot of damage on this team before. As I mentioned, really just the York unit and the Luffy unit were the real main damage dealers in the last series of battles that we watched. In this one, we're taking on Vegapunk. One, because he gives a CT increase to int characters, so he gives a little bit better CT. And then secondly, he has a 40% HP cut to some units. Now, in cases like what you just saw here, where you get bound for 10 seconds, like, that can ruin a run. So this might not be a victory here, or it might be. Maybe we'll be able to pull it out. But in cases where you get bound, sometimes that's just how your luck rolls. But the idea of this team here is that obviously S-Hawk can do a bunch of damage with his special 2 defense. Luffy does a bunch of damage. Of course, Vegapunk with a 40% HP cut. And then you have Nami and Karina still to help with the special rewind that's there. So you can see we're probably going to lose this now. It is sometimes what it is. If we didn't get that special bound on those 3 units, we probably would have been in a much better shape. But that's what these theory crafting videos are for, to really go through some of these different content and say what works, what doesn't work. So this is just an alternative team, as I mentioned. Having Smoker on the back bench just helps you. Not only is it a 20 cost unit, but he also does a nice special bind to units. So it just helps you out there, lets you stay alive for a little bit longer. Again, Shaka's going to come and increase the specials. That's good. That'll give Luffy and even King, who actually wasn't scheduled to go by the time he went, the ability to come in and just do a bunch of damage here. And you can see Luffy just comes in too and just wipes out a bunch of units there, and obviously he forced out some, so he didn't kill every unit that's there. But unfortunately, we're at the point where we just don't have enough damage dealers to kill these guys before the units that were forced out come back. So I think we're still going to end up losing here. But this showcased the ability of that Shaka unit to give your unit special CT reduction to be able to get specials to go off much quicker. So we took a little bit of a nasty shot there. Obviously not ideal. Took out Luffy, which is good. Actually, we might win this one. So I didn't think we'd actually be able to win this one. But yeah, it looks like we might actually come back and win it. So yeah, hey, look at that. So as I mentioned, sometimes situations can be hairy. If you have a team that can just take a ton of attacks against you, and you don't have a lot of special binds or special rewards, it's really easy to kind of get this team going, get this team able to output some damage. So that gave us the good victory for fight number 1. I got really greedy on the second fight. I was like, oh, well, obviously we could beat that previous team, so let's just take on the full slasher team, right? We got this. Like, we're going to kill him. We're going to destroy him. This is going to be a humbling fight. One, because the main issue that you have on this team is you have both the Cracker unit and the Odin unit on their side that give a bunch of CT increase. So they're going to actually get their specials to be able to go off before us, and even if they don't, they have the Zoro and Saji unit on their side that can go ahead and get all their characters hastened to the top, so that then they can just absolutely destroy us. So yeah, this is probably a fight I should have avoided, and if you're using this team, like, I would specifically avoid the meta slasher team or the meta int team. I think you'll be fine against, like, strength team. I don't see really too much of an issue there. Even quick team, you should be good against. Dex team is probably a little bit trickier because they're much tankier. And while this team can output a lot of damage quickly, that they don't have a lot of staying power for a super long time. They're not a defensive team like that first series of videos that we did for PvP. So yeah, I would avoid probably Dex teams and then Int and Slasher teams, unless it's one that doesn't have a lot of cooldowns where you can actually get some damage off and go. But you can see we're still actually doing a good amount of damage here. Unfortunate for us that they just had their units get their CT done much quicker, but sometimes that is what it is. So yeah, we're going to definitely lose this battle here. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. But still, it's an alternative team you can use. It's obviously not as good as the int team that we just showed in the previous set of PvP matches, but it's still a okay team that can do some damage and get you where you need to go if you don't have some of those other units. So to wrap up this video, let's do one final fight. Let's see who we have as potential opponents here. All right. Yeah, as I mentioned in the previous fight, yeah, avoid any int teams like that are meta teams. But I did want to try out a Dex team. Now, obviously, they have a pretty good set of units here. They have the Ace unit, who's really good. They have the Lucci unit, who's obviously really good. Outside of that, like, it's not really too scary. Law's not too bad. Luffy's not too bad. So yeah, I'm not like super worried about this team. It doesn't have some of the later ones, some of the last Dex PvP legends that just came out there, like Pizarro and those guys are San Juan Wolf. So it'd be a lot probably trickier against a fight like that. But let's just see if this team can actually take on this Dex team here. As I mentioned, we get the awesome haste. That's good. Get some special reverse. Get 40% damage. We'd like to see that. We're going to take a shot from Luffy here, Lucci and Ace. So obviously that's not going to be fun. Luckily, it looks like Ace got maybe pushed back in order. Luffy just hitting with a bunch of monster shots. But at this point, we have our Nami and Karina going. Reverse specials. And at that point, once S-Hawk and Luffy go, like, it should pretty much be over. Alright, so they're still chugging along. I got the revive there, which is just a pain to deal with. They do have the Danshin Jiao who came in on the back bench who can give the confusion, which is just a really annoying debuff. Because if your special's ready, it will just completely reset it and not let you use your special. We can take another shot from Lucci here. But still, we're hanging on. Our back bench is still ready to go. So I'm still feeling pretty confident. We got the 30% boost. Got the haste. Love to see that. Nami and Karina are going to go. Hopefully stop the Danshin Jiao from doing his confusion if all goes well. And yeah, we didn't have to worry about that. So yeah, this is just a different focused mind team, right? This team was a much more offensive focused team. So Just to sum up the kind of 3 different series of PvP videos that we looked at and wrap up this video, the first set of PvP fights that we did were really a defensive focused team. I would probably use those Vegapunk units as defensive. They're pretty good, but they don't really have that offensive output to really be super viable. If you don't have some of the latest and greatest int legends, though, as you saw in the second series of videos, you do have the Shaka unit and York, who fit in perfectly on that int team. Just help your team go much quicker. Now, obviously, the Yamato and S-Hawk would be better than them if you have them, so obviously you want to use that. But if you don't have some of those units, you have replacements, which is good, who could still probably get you a good amount of victories. And then to wrap it up, we looked at one more team that was a little bit more offensive-focused in their nature. They weren't so much focused on cooldown rewind as the previous teams were, but it's just a much more offensive-heavy int team and cerebral team that kind of helped you get through that content. So that's the 3 different series we did. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Overall, like, he's not meta defining or game breaking on PvP. Yeah, he makes the Vegapunk units much more efficient and operational in what they do, and if they release more Vegapunk units going forward in the future, like, he will just automatically help boost them, right? He'll automatically give them haste, and you'll be off to the races. So this guy's potential can only increase going forward. But I think how things are now and in the current state, he's not worth pulling for. I mentioned that in the pull video. You shouldn't have pulled for this guy. Well, he has some interesting PvP and PvE mechanics. Like, he's not going to change anything. And if you don't have him, it's not going to be the end of the world. So that's going to wrap it up for me today. I hope you guys liked this video. Hope you guys saw what Shaka is capable of. And I know I keep calling him Shaka, even though it's Shaka, Pythagoras, and Edison. But for simplicity, just bear with me. But yeah, let me know how this Shaka unit is, in your opinion. You know, did you pull him? Have you had any other experiences with him? Did you use any other different teams to build that might be better? And have you faced him in defensive faces teams yet? Have you actually lost to this kind of team, especially the Vegapunk team? And that's going to wrap it up for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, like and subscribe. And until next time, be kind to each other.